belt out those songs. You're never too old to sing about the love of Jesus, are we, hey? And I'm sure that, to me, it was meaningful listening to Stan because I know there's been many, many years of experiences where he's walked with the Lord, and I've heard a few this week. And Stan, it was just a privilege to stand beside you there. It really was. Christmas. We've got through it almost. We're there. Some of you had some great lunches and great stories. And yeah, I had a good time. Quiet time. I jumped in the pool. Oh, that was hot yesterday. I lost 2 chooks with the heat because that sea breeze didn't come in till, so late. And my white silkies, people think, they're white, but they've got black skin. And so they go down like a bag of spuds because the black reflects the heat. And it's going round and round them, just getting the water up to them. But hey, I've still got about, 130 odd more, so that's okay. But so that's what I did yesterday. I got some presents. I got another beautiful chicken cage that my wife lovingly made up with her own hands. It makes it more special. I made my own up years back at Dad's place with my wife together, and they've been the best cages I've got. And she's tried to copy that, and it's a beautiful cage. I got some ceramic water dishes. They're the best because they keep the water the best for the chickens, and so they gave me some of those. I got a book on living, and I'm looking forward to reading that. And I got a book which is a biography of Billy Graham, written by Franklin Graham. So I'm looking forward to reading that too, and just getting some insights into that great preacher. So yeah, I had a good. I got my gluten steaks too for Christmas lunch. So that's everything as well. And I hear some of you had some good times too. Something great happened over at your place there, Gary and Heather. Yeah, I tried to get them to come down and tell me the story. So you have to go and ask him Gary the story, but he's a bit sneaky. Anyhow, all in all, he popped the question. And we've got another engaged couple in our midst. So congratulations. Let's give them a round of applause. I've never seen Heather so bubbly and telling me the story of how she was just totally caught by surprise. And it's beautiful to see that type of thing happening. That's what friendship, that's what love is all about. It's been 7 weeks since I've been in the pulpit here. But you've had some great preachers, even some from America. You've rung in here as well, which is good. My life's been happening. Midland Mills, I've got so many stories to tell you. I saw the hand of God moving when I battled with getting through the council, the sea container. I've written sermons, I can do them no worries, but writing these speeches up to speak to the council, I sweated on that. It took me hours, and it was I knew every word was listened to. One councillor commented back to me and said, "It's been said that you're collecting a collection of or a honeypot of undesirables." Well, that got me going. And I'm thinking, hey, yeah, I'm in a good camp there. Jesus was a class with being with sinners too, so I'm okay, we're okay. Let's go for it. That's when the tide started turning in that council. And then the following week, we had to call in 4 or 5 people to come and speak to it for us on our part. And I had people like Kim Grubb and a few people down at the Midlass, and a few homeless people come and speak. And on the Sunday afternoon, on the Monday afternoon, the mayor said to me, the person that put a counter motion in against your motion has withdrawn it. And I thought, thank you, God. And he said, we don't need your 5-minute speech anymore. I said, great. Do you need the other guys? Yeah, we need the other guys. Okay. Next day he calls me. He said, the person that's been letterboxing against you has come and fessed, and they've declared their interest in what you're doing, and they'll not be voting tonight. And so your motion will go through as you guys have submitted it. Oh, fantastic. And I could just see the mountain of darkness, the mountain of opposition just moving. And I know that many of you have been praying, and many down there have been praying. and you could just see the power of God in a mighty way move, and it just went through the council that night so smoothly, and it's just been just a pleasure to tell the homeless people that, hey, the City of Midland loves you guys. You're now going to have a sea container here to help make things better for you guys, because the Adventist Church has fought for you and loved you. And that to me means so much, that we can make a stake in our community and say, we as a Seventh-day Adventist Church are here for the community. Last Saturday night I was over at Ellenbrook. They're running it over there. And I had a lady come up to me and she said, I've been waiting to meet you over a number of weeks. I've met some of your friends and I've been waiting to meet you. I said, oh, okay. She said, you're a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. I said, yeah, sure am. She said, I've been waiting to meet a Seventh-day Adventist. She said, I've been Googling up on the internet and I've watched the DVD Tell It to the World. And she said, it says in there that your church was guided by the hand of God. I said, yeah, it sure was. She said, it says in there that you had a lady who, whenever the church was at a crossroads in its infancy, this lady would have a vision and your church would correct itself according to that. And she guided your church. And I said, oh, yes. I said, you're talking about Ellen White. Yes, that young lady. And she said, your church is amazing. She said, and I said, well, it is. I said, would you like a book? And she said, I've written by her. She said, yeah, I'd love it. And I went over to the ABC, couldn't find any books that were any Desire of Ages that were the cheap type giveaways. Anyhow, one of you members, Beck, she said, hey, I've got a Desire of Ages. I've been wondering how to give it away. I said, well, here's the story. And I told her the story. She said, that's what I've got this Desire of Ages for. And so I'm looking forward to connecting with this lady once again and giving her a Desire of Ages, because she's virtually studying her way to our church. And the Holy Spirit is working out there where we just don't know. We need to pray for our church. We need to pray for our communities. We need to pray, for Midland Mills, but for other creative ways that we can evangelise our neighbourhood and city with the good old gospel of Jesus' story and of his soon return. So thank you for a year where you have all really, really worked hard. And there's been a lot of soups cooked, a lot of pumpkins and potatoes peeled, a lot of preparation work done behind the scenes. Yes, a lot of prayer. And yes, hours down there standing by the barbecue. Hours too repairing barbecues. Hours there speaking to people who need to hear that they are loved by God. Church, you're amazing. Absolutely amazing. You've done a wonderful, wonderful job. And yes, the stories of where God is moving, where people like Tell It to the World, people watching it themselves, you can say, I'm a part of that great story. Even though you might have peeled a potato or flipped an egg, that's all the ingredients that God needs to put together to say, yes, I can touch that heart. I can touch that heart. I can reach that person, because God's church is alive. God's church is ready. Let's be that church. My sermon today is one that I had listed down about 10 weeks or so to preach on. And because when we get our sermonic year out, I start dwelling on those sermons and thinking about them. And this one here is Friendship with Jesus. It's a part of the series that we did on the life of Jesus, and back a month or two ago. And so Friendship with Jesus. And I just figure that it fits in beautifully too with Christmas and the Christmas theme. So here we go, Friendship with Jesus. Most of you are familiar with a song from a TV sitcom called Friends. Oh, Tlissa's looked up. I tell you what, that thing must be played more than cricket replays in my house, I reckon. She's bought the box set of all the DVDs and... Oh, so it's my fault. Okay. Anyhow, it's played over and over and over, and you get to know the theme song. How many of you are familiar with the words from that theme song? Have you ever stopped to realise what's being said there? It goes something like this. So no one told you life was going to be this way. Your job's a joke. You're broke. Your love life is DOA. It's like you're always stuck in second gear. When it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your year. You know, some of us can relate to this song more than others, can't they? Some of us have those days that stretch into bad weeks, into bad months, into bad years. It's as if there's a hole in our heart that is yearning to be filled with meaning and relationships. That this consumeristic world can never, ever fill with its consumeristic junk. John 15 tells us a story here of Jesus and how he longs to fill the whole of meaning and relationships in all of our hearts. And no matter if you've been here for 80, 90 years in this church, or if you've been here for 8 or 9 minutes, I think that this sermon is relevant, this story of Jesus is relevant for us today. John 15, and I've got from 9 and 17. I think we'll start out in verse 12. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John 15. John 15. No, we'll start at verse 9. As a Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you obey my commands, you'll remain in my love, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands and remain in his love. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you, that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love hath no one than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. You're my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know what a master's business is. Instead, I've called you friends. For everything I learned from my Father I've made known to you. You did not choose me, I chose you, and appointed you to go and bear fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. This is my command: love one another. In this passage here, Jesus says, I have called you friend. He could have said that any time in his life on earth. But he says it knowing that this is almost the last time that he will share bread and the fruit of the cup with his disciples. He is days away now from the reason he came to earth. And it would be the last time that he would be able to say something really significant this side of the resurrection. Jesus is describing to his disciples how they are to live after he is gone. And sometimes we like to complicate it, but here he's making it very, very simple. As the Father has loved me, as I have loved you, do the same to those around you. Simple message, but a message of power. This is a part of the great discourse of Jesus that he must have spoken to them sometime, somewhere between the supper and the garden. Jesus is talking along the way as he makes his way to Gethsemane. John takes care to describe very carefully what Jesus has said. And I think if you unpack what he's saying here in this passage that we just read, it's all about discipleship. Discipleship is about love as a relationship, and love as a way of being. If you look at the message that we are to do as God's last day church, because we too call ourselves the disciples of Jesus, our message must boil back down to a relationship, and our message must boil back down to love as a way of being. All too often we would much rather get into knots over theology, into knots over the correct theology, when the last day message to the world, I believe, is about a relationship, and the last day message to the world is about love as a way of being. That is the message that the world is dying to hear. That is the hole that is what will fill the hole of every hungry heart on this earth, whether they are homeless or whether they are living in a mansion down on the Swan River. We find in today's passage three aspects of this message of Jesus. It can be boiled down to the word friendship, but as a part of being a friend of God today, it has to have ingredients, a context, and we have to discover what true friendship, what true love really is. This is what Jesus initiated when he came down to earth, that we celebrated yesterday in what the world and us call Christmas. I believe too that this is what Felicity was talking about when she put the base here on this tree. There needs to be a base, a platform for every person who calls themselves a Christian. There needs to be a platform for every church, and there needs to be a platform for every witnessing event that is taken hold of from this church. And that comes back to a vibrant, daily, living friendship. So firstly, I want to look at the ingredients of friendship. And you'll find this is different than how society views friendship. When Jesus says that he wants to call us friend, he has a different thing in mind than what many of us think. Also, he had a different intent in mind than what the disciples were thinking. Today, we are the most connected generation that's ever walked on this earth. This thing, things on our wrists, computers as well. We are the most connected generation to ever live, and yet we are the loneliest generation to have ever lived. How can it be that we are most connected and that we are the most loneliest? According to Jesus, there are two ingredients that has to be a part of every friendship, every relationship. Verse 12 has the first one. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Jesus lets us in here to what the secret is to friendship. He says, sacrificial faithfulness. Sacrificial faithfulness. Jesus demonstrated this when he laid his life down for you and I. The greatest sacrifice that we could ever do. And he says, if you want to have a successful friendship, if you want to be a friend of God, he says, love others as I have loved you. Which means that those that we are praying for, those that we are loving, those that we are having relationships, are we prepared to die for them? That's what Jesus was going to do. In other words, it means going the extra mile. In other words, extending that generosity, extending that time, becoming sacrificial lovers in our friendships with others is what Jesus is calling us to do. And that takes time, it takes effort, it takes creativity. People will know that we love Jesus when we show them through practical ways a sacrificial love of Jesus. That's why just a token coin in an offering plate does not do it, doesn't cut it. Sacrificial love meant that Jesus came down himself, got his hands dirty, got his life messy with messy people, and died on a cross amongst criminals to show us what sacrificial love is all about. So, love that Jesus is calling us to do, a friendship that he's calling us to be, is firstly, it's sacrificial faithfulness. Second point, verse 15. The second ingredient for friendship is it the double S or one S? One S? One more? Thank you, teacher. Verse 15. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know what his master's business is. Instead, I've called you friends, for everything I learned from my Father I made known to you. So we find here, everything I've learned from the Father, I've made known to you. We find here vulnerable openness. Jesus showed us sacrificial faithfulness. Jesus showed us vulnerable openness. Vulnerable openness. Jesus lets us in on what his Father is doing. He says, hey, just come and see. There's a relationship between me and God I want to show you. And he's inviting us into the inner sanctum of his communion and his communication with God the Father. He says, see how we relate. That's how I want to relate to you. And so sacrificial faithfulness is held together by a vulnerable openness. And just as God was open with Jesus, just as Jesus was open with God, just as Jesus was open with the disciples, he's asking us to be open with each other as a vital ingredient in true friendship. These two things are what many of us avoid in our relationships. You think of when our relationships and friendships head on onto the rocks a bit. These two things have died. These two things are never promoted by the world. You'll never see them as advertisements on TV. And yet, they are the most vital ingredient in a friendship, in a relationship that we can ever have. A marriage relationship will not last until these two things kick in. And that's the same with our witnessing. We need to be looking for sacrificial faithfulness and openness and vulnerability. Shelley Turkle is an MIT professor who's been studying the effect of technology on our relationships with each other and from each other. And she writes this quote in her book. She says, "We now consume other people in bits and pieces. It's as though we use them as spare parts to support our fragile selves." So what it's saying is that the consumeristic world is invading our hearts through modern technology. Technology offers us a way to avoid the messiness that comes from being real in relationships. Whoa. She's saying something pretty powerful there. Technology offers us a way to avoid messiness that comes from being real in relationships. And you can just imagine, I wonder how many Christmas lunches yesterday where we were eating together, where family and friends that haven't been together for such a long time, and yet right beside us and in our hand is our technology. It's good. We need it to communicate. But has it put up a barrier and stopped us from being effective in our relationships, in our friendships, with each other and with God? Technology gives us the illusion of a friendship without acquiring sacrificial faithfulness and open vulnerability. It gives us a fake friendship, not the real. When we as Christ followers cultivate friendships with each other that has these two qualities, then Jesus says that the watching world will know that we are his disciples. Did you get that? All too often, we spend thousands of dollars on massive big evangelistic programs to try and grow our churches. And yet what Jesus is saying here in this passage, if we flesh it out, is that these two qualities living in the heart of a Christian are the greatest witness that we can do to the world around us. It says people will know that we are friends of Jesus. People will know that we have a special relationship with Jesus, and they will want and quest that relationship without us asking them for it. Part of our mission to the world is to pursue such friendship with Jesus that the world may see that what we have in Jesus is special, that the world may see what we have in Jesus is what they want and need. One of the best places to grow these two qualities is in Sabbath school and small groups. I'd like to really just for a moment just stop and say that I really believe that we need to turn the heat up on these. The devil has tried to spook us at times from vibrant Sabbath school classes and vibrant small groups where we reach and meet and live with each other, because he's trying to knock these two ingredients out of us. And once he gets that out of the church, he can stultify it. All too often, we do too much church like we are this morning, sitting in rows. You're looking at each other's heads. You're looking down at me, and I'm just doing jug to mug. And I had not got a clue this morning how Peter is. I haven't got a clue of what his walk with the Lord is like. I haven't got a clue. I can't be faithful, sacrificial faithfulness. I can't do open vulnerability, because Peter's just sitting in there in a nice warm pew watching me do a sermon. The same with James. We have to find ways as a church to do church in circles more than just in rows. And it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of patience. But you know, when I get to know, for example, Mark, in ways that outside of just watching him sitting in a church pew, it means that I get to be able to minister to him with the gifts that God's given me, and he can minister to me with the gifts that God's given him. Ellen White, when she described church, said that church must be an exchange. She actually uses the word exchange. And I think we've come a long, long way away from that. We need to think more of how I can be a friend to you and you can be a friend to me in church. And then if you think that if someone's in church for the first time and they see us doing church in circles, there's a net where they catch the love of Jesus through our everyday discipleship living. I highly encourage you to, one, come to Sabbath school. And two, get involved in a small group. I have a vision for homes right across this city where during the week the Bible is open, the Word is studied, but also hearts are open. People are praying for each other, caring for each other, praying for the needs of our church, praying for the needs of the city, and where as well evangelism springs from those beautiful homes. Now, if the nature of true friendship is sacrificial faithfulness and vulnerable openness, Jesus now reveals the context of where that has to happen, and that's our next point. These are the ingredients. Where does it happen? John verse 15 and 16. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I've called you friends, for everything I've learned from my Father I've made known to you. You did not choose me, I chose you and appointed you to bear fruit that will last. Then the Father will give you whatever you ask in my name. This passage is a part of a larger section of John's Gospel, calling Christians to do their part in God's mission to restore the world. He says, I've appointed you to bear fruit that will last. True friendships are forged when people share together in a cause or a mission greater than themselves. True friendships are formed when people engage in mission together, in a mission that's greater than themselves. C.S. Lewis, in his book called Four Loves, says this: lovers often face each other as they talk and share with each other. You've been there, you see them just face each other and they share. It might be good, it might be pretty nasty stuff, but they're at each other, face to face. But friends almost never will talk about their friendships, and they don't face each other. They stand side by side, facing the same horizon, facing the same journey, seeking the same truth, living the same mission, sharing the same purpose. Friendship emerges not for in its own space, but for the sake of something greater. Culture today encourages relationships that are all about yourself and not about a purpose. That's why in his last discourse, Jesus gives us the gospel commission. Go in all the world and preach the gospel. Baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. We know that passage so well, don't we? It's given in the context of sacrificial faithfulness. It's given in the context of open vulnerability. It's given in the context of friendships, love, and relationships. Jesus' 12 disciples came from a mix of backgrounds, and he formed them into a group that changed the world. They came from a mixed background of classes. They came from a mixed background of political affiliations. They came from a mixed background of religious leanings. Under normal circumstances, they would never, ever have chosen to hang out together with each other. But Jesus called them. Come and be a part of what? My club? No. Come and be a part of my mission. Come and see. They came and saw, and they encouraged their brothers, their friends, to come and be a part of what Jesus was doing. That's the evangelism that Jesus was calling them to do. That's the evangelism he was wanting to show them. A mixed group of people, but with the power of Jesus, the friendship of Jesus, and seeing his faithfulness and his openness, they turned the world upside down. Look at their church. Their church, they were even more radical, those who formed the early church. Even a wider range of differences than the disciples. And yet God used that church when he poured the Holy Spirit upon it at Pentecost to be such a powerful force across the world that hearts were shook. Thousands of baptisms in a day, and the world just knew that Christ reigned, because the people that call themselves Christians, every time they opened their mouth, the love of Jesus, their friendship with Jesus, just came out. And they are the ones that turned the world upside down. We look at the church today and we think, how can God use us to once again blow this mighty wind and see the power in the church be God's church in the last days? But I want to say that we live in a world too with the consumeristic pressures that are even more powerful than those that formed the first church did. We have such a varied backgrounds in our church. We now have as well multicultural churches because of modern day technology has allowed us to, with our planes and our boats and our trains and that type of thing, for beautiful people to come and join our countries. What is going to pull this church together to be a church that changes the world around them? It's going to be a church where the members see the face of Jesus personally. It's going to be a church where the members seek to be in his presence daily. It's going to be a church that has imprinted in the hearts of their members the sacrificial faithfulness of Jesus, and be prepared to live their friendships with the same power of the sacrificial love that Jesus showed when he died. It's going to be a church where its members have open vulnerableness, where they don't just hide their lives behind their suit coats and their fancy tops, where the church that is heart to heart, sharing the journey together, sharing the ups and the downs together. That's the church that God will use. And it looks like it could be improbable today, but when you have the Holy Spirit pulling these people together with one heart, you have a church that shows the communities around it that this church is different. This church knows Jesus. This church is on a mission because this church is a mission. This church is God's last day answer to the world that's going down. The power of the first church in the book of Acts is that the world took notice of that church. I dream, I pray, I work as a minister for the day when the world will take notice of Swan Valley Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's all will come together though, the ingredients and the context, when we as individuals hit this. The one true friend Verse 15. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I call you friends. This was a shock to the disciples. Absolutely shook them to the core. They were Jews. And because they were Jews, they wanted things like kingship. They wanted masters. They wanted a creator. They wanted a Lord. But God as a friend? No way. They could not come at that. Gods weren't meant to be that. Then added to the Jewish mindset, you got the Greco-Roman mindset, where friends happen between two persons of equal status. Where friends happen between two persons of equal status. So, a master could not be a friend of a servant, for example. A man could not be a friend of a woman, for example. A rich could not be friends with the poor, for example, because none were considered equal. Jesus simply looks at the disciples, no matter their age, no matter their background, no matter their ethnicity, and no matter of how much money they've got. And he says, I call you friends. And this morning, the same Jesus says to you and I call you friends. I don't care where you've been, where you've come from. I don't care about your theology. When you turn your heart from sin and follow me, I call you friend. And that's powerful and radical to the world today. Prostitutes, fishermen, tax collectors, political zealots, women, men, Jews, Gentile, slave, free, wealthy, poor, red, yellow, brown, black, white, conservatives, liberals, everyone. Jesus is speaking to you and I today, as he did in this passage, and says, I call you friend. Lay down your pretense. Come on the journey with me of faithful, sacrificial faithfulness and open vulnerability, and we can change the world. I'm saying yes to Jesus today. How about you? As Jesus offers you his friendship this morning, where do you stand? One day, a farmer, it has to be in Victoria because there's no starlings here. There's these rumours that they shoot them at the border. I don't know if those stories are true or not, but we don't have the joy of starlings over here. But a farmer one day got absolutely mad with these starlings. These starlings, when they get together in a mob of 50 to 100 or more, and they sit on the power lines or sit on tree branches, they yatter away and it just gets through your ears, it gets into your head. They wreck your fruit. They are really introduced vermin. And so he grabs a shotgun and he walked out to these pesky starlings, and he just let a few rounds into that bush where they were all gathered together. Well, they just rained down onto the ground. And he didn't see his pet parrot join the crows. And he fired a few shots in there, and he fired a few shots into his pet parrot without realising it. He walked over to the fallen birds and was surprised to see the parrot there with a shot through its broken wing. His children came out and said, Dad, what have you done? Dad, what happened? And the farmer simply replied, "Bad company. Bad company." Scripture warns us too today to avoid bad company, harmful influences, the pressure of the world, the pull of consumerism that tries to stop us from a friendship with Jesus. Today, where's your company? You see, we've preached all morning about Jesus being our friend, and he is. But I ask you this morning, what company are you keeping? And have you got a friendship with Jesus? After all, that's why he came down for as a baby that we celebrated yesterday. That's why he died on the cross for sacrificial faithfulness. That's why he's coming again, because he keeps his promises. He keeps his promises to Christians. He keeps his promises to a church that is about his mission with him. A friendship, a relationship with those who he loves and those who is coming back soon. Jesus is coming soon. The signs tell us very, very clearly. But this morning I want to ask you, as we border a new year, how is your friendship with Jesus? Is it all it can be? Does he know you? Do you know him? And are you living for him with every breath you take?